This is the recorded lecture for Chapter 10 of HSC 400 Healthcare Analytics, and what we're going to look at in this chapter is really how you make data usable. In other words, you collect data, like we said in the previous chapter, and then the next question is, well, how do you make it so that you can do something with it? Having data is great, but until you can have the right person and the right information at the right time, then it doesn't really help you much. So this is just a way to look at that. The first thing we'll talk about is, besides accuracy and timeliness, usability and accessibility are two of the most really important qualities of effective analytics. If you do an accurate job and you do it on time, but it's not usable information and nobody can access it, that's not very helpful. Now, in other words, software must be easy to use to save downstream man hours, so that's important. And sometimes we become penny wise and pound foolish, where we use less than quality software, and so we have a lot more time invested in the process instead of just buying the better software. I'll never forget, there's a data mining software called Clementine, came out in about 2004. And Clementine really would go through medical records, electronic medical records, and it could pull the text from those medical records and discern whether certain tests were done. And it was about $3,000. And my CEO, I was a CEO at the time, Chief Operating Officer, and the Chief Executive Officer said, well, that's a lot of money. And I said, well, let's look at the time we're spending now to extract records. And so we sit down and we had 4 nurses which were extracting records at somewhere around 30 hours a week. And they were doing that pretty much full time. And we added up their hours. We'd pay for Clementine in just about a month and a half of their hours. And we needed their time for other things too. So they were not getting other things done because they were busy manually abstracting these records, which was such a pain in the butt. So after we saw that, I said, well, maybe we should do that. It's like a good idea. Money well spent, so we did. Usability includes the presentation and visualization of the information. If you can't get your point across, it's not really helpful. Now, presentation and visualization of information isn't worth a darn unless the person who is making the decisions doesn't get it and understand it. Graphs, charts, and other data visualizations can facilitate understanding of the data patterns and provide what's called evidence-based decision-making process. So we're making decisions based on evidence, data, not on gut reaction. Data visualization is an extremely critical tool for healthcare analytics, because in the transformation process, because it's healthcare analytics and healthcare in general is a pretty sophisticated, complicated process. Think about just going to get your blood drawn. Somebody has to order the test, so they have to do something to order it. Has to get the lab. The lab has to acknowledge that. You have to go to the lab, or the lab comes to you if you're in the hospital. Lab draws your blood. They have to run the test. They have to get the test back to the chart. The person who ordered the test has to see those tests to make a decision. That's a lot of steps for just a lab test, and so that's just a minor issue in the world of healthcare when you think of the massive amount of information and all that. The data visualization serves several important quality and performance functions. It identifies trends and signals in quality and performance data, so it tells us when things are going well and things aren't going well. Helps to communicate goals, objectives, and targets of the HCO's, the healthcare organization's strategy, maybe to all of its employees or to managers. It helps ensure results of improvement activities of quality teams and managers and the stakeholders. And it's important in making numerical and statistical analysis more user-friendly. Like I said, you put somebody to sleep with enough statistics. And so you want to put it in a usable form. Now, data visualization is the process of taking output from analytical tools and processes and visually representing the information in ways that allow decision makers and quality improvement teams, process improvement teams, to more easily comprehend and ultimately act on the information. They have to know which way is north when you give them the information. So if you give them information they're not sure where north is at, you haven't helped them at all. You've given them a bunch of gobbledygook. The most common visualizations we use are bar, column, and line charts, which may be presented in their own right or as a part of a comprehensive performance dashboard. Now, we've kind of beat up dashboards in the past lectures because we said that sometimes they're very stagnant and people are still measuring stuff that isn't even need to be measured. But if you have a dynamic dashboard that has real-time information and that people can pull up and take a look at on their own, it's pretty important. Now, to be maximally effective, data visualization should have greater penetration into mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets. It's really important that the data is easily accessible. I should be able to pull up my smartphone and look at the dashboard on my smartphone. If you can't do that, and you can say, okay, well, just go to the URL, go to the address on the internet. That's great, except if it isn't fixed for or created for a smartphone on a smaller screen, then it's pretty hard to look at. So it makes more sense. Analytics visualizations implemented on mobile devices range from single mobile versions of the desktop type reports to fully interactive data exploration tools. So you can actually put a person can look up and say, okay, I want to know what my length of stay have been for the last month. Click, and then you can pick it up on that dashboard. Now, presenting and exploring information effectively, the quantity of available data to HCOs is maximally increased. It's exponentially increased. That's like instead of 10 to the first, it's now 10 to the 12th. So that's 12 zeros behind the 1 as far as the information over the last few years. And that trend is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger because everything we create from this point on has wireless capabilities or Bluetooth capabilities and is able to send that information to somewhere to be collected. The quality of the data and how it's presented to the visualization methodologies, unfortunately, hasn't improved with increased quantity. Our technique for showing that data has not really improved at the same trajectory, if you will, that we saw the actual quantity of data increase. So that's important. So visualization tools can make sophisticated and complex information far more easy to understand. So you can start to see the interreactions. Visualization tools do not have extraneous distractions, and they do not aid in effectiveness of understanding information. So if they shouldn't have the extraneous distractions. A lot of people will make a visualization like a graph. They'll add all sorts of bells and whistles. I've heard people have audience clapping and all sorts of sound. It's so distracting. You really want to see the information. You want to see it clean. You want to see it accurate. Now there's some things you can do to show this accuracy more completely, but you can really make data cruddy by doing that. Now, how visualizations are used to demonstrate relationships. Relationships they examine if the correlation exists between two or more data points. That's what they do. A comparison is a contrast between different variables. Composition portrays a complete picture of variables, so it looks at all those different variables together. Distribution is used to study how data points are distributed through the data set. A trend over time is used to plot a time series of variables, and deviation is used to detect when values deviate from historical baseline or what our upper control or lower control should be our standard expectations. So these are ways that we can demonstrate those relationships through this process. Now, when we look at different kinds of display techniques, different kinds of charting, we have scatter charts, line charts, bar charts, column charts, pie charts, data table, SPC, and a box plot. And you see which of all those areas we talked about before, these areas, which ones are able to depict their particular groups. Whereas a scatter chart can show relationship, comparison, and distribution, but it cannot show composition, trend, and deviation. And all the charts have something missing. Like even column charts can't really show relationships in most cases. So you can see that none of them are perfect, and so you have to make sure that you're picking the right chart for the right information. This is called chart junk, and I call it gobbledygook. This is just a big bunch of crap. This background is really distracting. They put a bar chart on top of a column chart to show us what that means. It doesn't really tell us that. There's no explanation down here of what each one of these does. I'm assuming the bar chart does certain things, but there it is. And so it really doesn't help us, if you will, to look at what the quantity we're looking at is. So it doesn't really help us to see that. It's just really junk. And so it's not as helpful as you might think. Now, if we took that same information that's here in this gobbledygook and we put it here and said, okay, this is the portable x-rays, this is x-rays, and look what happens. We can see that total x-rays done by each shift. We can see which quantity is done. More portable x-rays tend to be done, obviously, in the night shift. That makes sense. So you can see that that increases, and you get an idea of the numbers. It'd be nice if they actually put the numbers in here, too. That would be good, too, where people can start to see the actual numbers. When they just put the bars up, it's not as helpful. So putting the actual number of elements in each one, that's also a helpful addition. Now, how to make better information displays. Some of the problems that can occur with visualizations include what's in the area of explanation. Some data elements or other components are not explained or defined. And I like I say this, I kind of can estimate what this amount is each time. I know this is bigger than these two. These two look about the same, but this doesn't tell me whether this is significant or not. So I need to know the number. I can sort of guesstimate maybe 45 to 55, and so that's 10, and maybe 20 to 32 or 33, so that's maybe 12 or 13. I get that, but it doesn't, it's not, I'm sort of guesstimating, as it were. Discrimination occurs when items on the chart is not easily distinguished, such as chart designs designed for color, but they're printed in black and white, so the symbols are made too small to be readable. A color chart that now prints in black and white doesn't do a darn thing for me. It doesn't really tell me consistent information. Gray to light gray to dark gray may be helpful, but probably not. Construction, the chart layout is an error, such as tick marks are incorrectly spaced, the labels are incorrect, there's incorrect scales, all those kind of things, and that really detracts from the presentation. Now, how you avoid visualization issues is you make the data stand out. The data is your prime player in a chart. Not your fancy pictures, not all the other stuff, and all this decoration that people like to put on there. That doesn't really make anything different. Looking at the data is important. What do you want to get across? How nice you can make a chart, or what the data says. And you should use reference lines whenever appropriate, and you should strive for clarity. You should have somebody look at your charts and go, well, I don't understand this, and make it understandable. I used to have to do a presentation for the chief of UCOM, USER actually, or UCOM, European Command, and I have to go travel there 300 miles every week and do this presentation. And let me tell you, my bar graphs and my charts had to be very self-explanatory because they would be really neat, really angry, and most of the people I was reporting to were generals, 2, 3, 4-star generals. So if you gave them gobbledygook, they would eat you alive, and I knew that, so I gave them very, very straightforward information. But I didn't try to add all this decoration to it. I did use some variations so I could show some subtleties, but not just to decorate it. And they appreciate that. I strive for clarity, so when I got through, they knew what I had said. This is a sample performance dashboard. It looks at length of stays all the way down. You can see the hours and such. It's kind of nice because it tells you, it lets you go through this process. You can look at a 13-month trend at the end. You can see, well, this is pretty stagnant. It's pretty much staying the same. This is kind of varying here. This appears to be kind of going down. Maybe not. Maybe there's seasonal variation. This looks like it's not really in any direction. This looks like it's sort of trending up, but hard to tell. So it kind of tells you what the target is and what we're currently doing, so we can see that are we doing anything good, and it helps you to kind of see if your change makes a difference. The purpose of the dashboard is it should achieve more than one objective. You don't really have a dashboard that says, this is how much money we're making. Like, it should not be splattered with every indicator available. So somewhere between 1 and somewhere between everything, there should be some value. And it should have your value. And so you really want to pick the critical indicators. If dashboards are for QI or PI purposes, the information must relate to those purposes. And dashboards should fit on a single screen. Now, there are some dashboards that have, especially enterprise-wide dashboards, where it has a lot of information the CEO wants to see, and you can give the overview and let them click on it to get the underview of that. So you create multiple layers, so to speak, and that's really helpful. Well-designed dashboard can be an invaluable tool for improving quality, but it needs the right metrics, the targets, the triggers, and it can't be just every indicator known to God, man. It has to be more specific. Some design hints for dashboards. Focus on the indicators that are most critical to quality, and or if you will, and also are part of the strategic plan or strategic goals of the hospital. Display appropriate indicators. Don't be afraid to develop multiple dashboards. Sometimes, like I said, I like to layer them. I like the top layer to say, okay, let's talk about everything with length of stay. So you say total length of stay of the hospital was X across the board. You click it, and then it gives you a breakdown of unit by unit, and it breaks down unit by what their trend is and all that kind of thing. That's what I like to see. It really helps because then I don't get inundated with information, but if I want to drill down, I can do it quickly. Avoid all unnecessary clutter and decoration. I can't say that enough. What you think is, when you start making dashboards, you start making charts, you think they're darn pretty, but they're just irritating the people that you report to. When you're going to do it, make sure the end users get some direction or some input in the design of the dashboard. And I say that again and again because different end users want it in a different way. And like I said, the layering effect is always very helpful because then they can see the overall. If they want to drill down to their unit, you want to make it like 3 clicks. Okay, so they want to see the length of stay. Click, they do that unit. Or you want to also make it maybe by unit. So you'd say all of the units did this. Here's the report for the whole thing. And then after that, if you want to drill down to your unit, you can do that. You can do it that way too. You can do it actually set up both ways in a dashboard. So you make the dashboard as visually appealing as possible, but you don't want it to be just really very stoic, if you will. But you do want to make it so it has some, has a little bit of a color to it, but you certainly don't want to fill it up with crap. So keeping dashboards on message, you use graphs, icons, and text and images. Graphs are the most common type of media display because most of the information we're looking at is quantitative data. How many are this? What's the number? That kind of thing. And the appropriate graph or chart should match the data being graphed, as we looked at earlier in that earlier slide. Icons. Icons are little graphic images that give us clear meaning to showcase certain information and highlight trends. I used to have a chief financial officer that worked for me, and she would always at the end of every graph, if you will, she'd have a little picture of a smile or a frown or just a straight lips, and that would tell you kind of where you're at. So you could look at those and say, oh, we got a smiley this time, we're in good shape, and she would tell you what that smiley meant. It's kind of handy, and you can use icons can be like circles or squares or triangles and those kind of things. Text is useful to communicate information that may not be suitable for graphical representation, but this has to be in bullet-like form. You can't write War and Peace. You can't write this great big narrative, and people are going to read it. It just really irritates them. And then images, they can help to clarify or highlight information, and they're not for decoration. You don't put a whole bunch of pictures on it. They help to clarify what you're doing. And sometimes when I have different clinics, I would have a picture of my clinic on the first page. When I had my title sheet, I would have a picture of my clinic there, each clinic there, so that people say, oh yes, that's the Montgomery Clinic. Then they would know that that was the right clinic. Now, agents and alert uses and considerations, they help to identify patients for inclusion in clinical research studies, so you want to have those that filter, if you will, the information. Alerting executives when excessive delays occur in care or something goes out of standard, if you will, or out of control. You want them to know that right away. And every one of these alerts should be actionable. You can't say, well, the building is old. Well, it's great, I've built a building. I can't really do anything about that right away. And these are kind of things you put for decision makers. You don't send them to the world, you send them to people who can create the change. And you want to ensure accuracy. If you start sending people out for saying that things are out of control and they're not, it'll be like the little boy who cried wolf. They'll stop looking. Now, providing accessibility to and ensuring usability of analytics systems. So as an HCO expands, their existing analytics and reporting portals often don't expand with them. So the organization, I remember an organization that was one hospital and suddenly became 10. And the portal was the same. Everything was exactly the same. And the other 9 hospitals really didn't find anything useful in that portal because we're still only reporting on one hospital. Not very logical. The other thing that's a great methodology, methodology is what we call self-serve. That means that if I'm looking at if I get up on Monday morning and I go to the office, I can pull up each of my clinics or each of my areas and say, okay, how are they doing? And look at the data and see what it looks like and see where we're trending, those kind of things. And I should be able to do that in a short period of time. If this is a 2-hour process to self-serve me, I'm not so happy. So there's some of that information. Now, users who need the information from dashboards can access the tools within the portal or repository. It allows users to retrieve data as needed. But the issue is that often you'll have these people that self-serve that suddenly will try to get a super intensive statistical analysis. They want it in 10 seconds. That's not the way it works. So if it has to go out and do a data search and do an analysis, which isn't instant, by the way, then sometimes there's a time requirement. So you need to be able to say to them, if you're ordering this is the kind of thing you order in the morning, come back in the afternoon and get. Or you can look back and get in the afternoon. Or you can order it at 1 o'clock and get it at 2 o'clock. You need to tell them that so they understand that. Now, if everything they ask for takes an hour to get there, that's not going to be helpful, but there's a lot of those very sophisticated questions that people ask. That doesn't mean they're frivolous, it just means they're harder to get. Now, enhancements to analytic portals include organize the portal effectively, should be organized logically and provide easy access to all the strategic and quality goals. Very important to look at that. To provide a comprehensive documentation, it informs users how the portal is organized. It should reduce and reuse. It should minimize the number of reports that are available to only those that have strategic importance. It's really important that you're not just putting a bunch of gobbledygook, and I use that term a lot out there, or a lot of, you inundate people, you put a wave of water on top of them, they're all washed away. You need to give them information that's usable. And you should try to minimize the analytic runtime. you should try to, if you're going to have to run things, your program should report efficiently and optimize actions to minimize the turnover time. So if I ask for something, I should be able to get it. If it's standard, I should get it pretty quickly. If it's something customized, it may take a little longer. Those are the successes you can have by doing that. So now we've looked at basically, I looked at dashboards and how to report information here in this particular chapter, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. We are completed.